So, hello again. This is 6th Heritage Forum of Central Europe, and I am very happy that this session will have a real global outreach. As I mentioned during our inaugural session, we have been able to build some strategies with one of the most important initiatives in the domain of cultural heritage in recent months, our World Heritage. This is, as I said, a real bottom-up action to mobilize awareness concerning the changes and challenges in World Heritage Site. And I have a great pleasure that today we can have a session of two subgroups, the group working groups, the group working on new heritage approaches and group working on sustainability. And now my role is being finished. I am giving the floor to Pamela Durán, who is based in Munich now, and who will chair the whole meeting. I just want to remind all our listeners and followers to send comments and questions on the chat so that we can be able to answer them and also to see some of your reactions. Just one small remark: the session will last 2 hours, and after that we will start our parallel session. So, Pamela and dear guests, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Agatha. Good afternoon, everybody. Good day and good night, depending on the part of the world you're at. Welcome to this session on heritage, sustainability, and resilience. This session is very special because we have an event that has been jointly prepared for you by OWH Initiative, New Heritage Approaches and Sustainability Themes on the occasion of the 6th Heritage Forum of Central Europe, a biennial event organized by the International Cultural Center in Krakow. I am Pamela Durán Díaz from the Technical University of Munich and a member of the OWH Sustainability Team. I feel honored to share the stage with such a transdisciplinary and multicultural panel today. We have Giordi Morato, Director of the UNESCO Chair of Sustainability from the Polytechnic University of Catalonia. He will talk about ancestral hydrotechnologies for resilience and adaptation to the climate emergency. Welcome, Jordi. We also have the presence of Dr. Rubén Pesci, President of LACAM and co-convener of OWH Sustainability Team. He will talk about heritage and evolutionary project, the case of the Biosphere Reserve in the urban environment of Santa Catarina in Brazil. Welcome, Rubén. Thank you for being here. We count also with the presence of Dr. Iggy Gildim, our World Heritage Sustainability Team Coordinator. She will talk about heritage in localizing the Sustainable Development Goals, comparing international advocacy and local site management. Welcome, Iggy. Thank you for being here. And last but not least, we have the presence of Dr. Cornelius Holtorf, Professor of Archaeology and holder of the UNESCO Chair on Heritage Futures at Linnaeus University. He's also the director of the graduate school in contract archaeology, and he will talk about cultural heritage strengthening human resilience. Thank you very much for your willingness and enthusiasm to participate in this event. Our keynote speakers will deliver a presentation grounded on a case study, and then we'll engage in a roundtable discussion that I'm certain will be very rich, fertile, and enlightening for all. And before yielding the floor to our speakers, I would like to thank Monica Bahia and Daniele Pini, the co-coordinators of the OWH New Heritage Approaches, for giving us this space and for being such incredible hosts. Monica, would you kindly tell us more about New Heritage Approaches themes and activities? The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Pam. My name is Monica Bahia. I am a landscape architect and urban planner and lecturer of the Professional Master Course in Design and Heritage at the Federal University of Rio de Janeiro. On behalf of the Our World Heritage Movement and the New Approaches team, and also the sustainability team, I'm also very happy to welcome you all to this session 15 of the New Heritage Approach webinar, entitled Heritage Sustainability, Resilience, and the 2030 Agenda. It is a pleasure to be here with you today, and I would like to thank Agatha and the International Cultural Center in Krakow for hosting this session as part of the 6th Heritage Forum of Central Europe. And I also would like to thank you, Pamela, for moderating this session. I would like to share my screen very quickly, if possible, so that I can, well, I don't know if it's possible. I'm not finding the button, but anyway, I think that the main message that it's important to share with you today is that we are carefully developing this Our World Heritage movement together with different partners composed for people from various parts of the world. And this is something very, very stimulating because we are having the opportunity to exchange ideas and to work together. I think in this month of June, is dedicated to the debate of new heritage approaches from various perspectives. We will we are hosting 24 sessions, 4 project exhibitions, and with the partnership of 21 coordinators and 75 speakers. And July will be dedicated to the debate of sustainability in a series of other diverse activities. I think that those contributions has been very complementary and pointed out to the need to expand the concepts of landscape and heritage to discuss the choices of heritage values to be protected, to incorporate social practices, uses and right-based approaches, and also to encourage collective actions, and of course recognizing other dimensions of landscape, of heritage, and knowledge extend beyond the specialist visions. The COVID pandemic has been very difficult and harmful in many ways for all of us, as individuals or as a collectivity. But thanks to these digital technologies, also brought opportunities for connection and integration. And this Our World Heritage Initiative and its transnational dialogues is in itself one example of these opportunities. From my perspective, I think the main message of this collaborative effort is that together with an open heart to hear what others have to say, we can help to create a better world. Thank you very much, and I wish you all a fruitful discussion.
Thank you very much, Monica. I take the chance to invite all of our attendees to the OWH events in June and July that we are preparing with all our zeal to provide a platform to discuss the sustainable practices and future of our heritage. I would also like to invite you to post your questions to our speakers in the chat. And having said that, please let me introduce our first speaker. Giordi Morato is a doctor in microbiology from the Autonomous University of Barcelona. He is the coordinator of the UNESCO Chair on Sustainability at the Polytechnic University of Catalonia since 2008. He is one of the founding members of the network Recycling the City, RecNet, and executive director of the Resurve program of the same RecNet network, and director of UNESCO SOST Offices Network. The main focus of his research is on the field of water quality, appropriate technologies for water purification and water treatment, sustainable water management, including water management and adaptation to climate change, resilience, circular economy, and the realization of urban and socio-ecological transformation projects in circular economy. Jordi has coordinated the report Situation and Evolution of the Circular Economy in Spain from the COTEC Foundation. This is the first report that has ever been made in Spain on that subject. Welcome, Jordi. The floor is yours.
Hello, good afternoon. Very special thanks to the organizer to invite, and a special thanks to my colleagues, and especially hello, Rubén. We want to talk especially about the importance of ancestral hydrotechnologies. We work in the UNESCO Chair on Sustainability and with the all water family in the UNESCO about the importance of water for our lives. And we work in close collaboration with a network of different joint offices, especially in Latin America in 7 countries. Well, I think I use, okay. We know no, that we live in a world in a health emergency, but also in a world in climate emergency. This important paper from Martin Schäfer and colleagues appeared some months ago, said that we'll have to adapt to the incredible increases in temperature during next years. No? They talk about that the human climate niche could evolve from the nowadays 11 to 15 degrees to a higher than 29 degrees in a 50-year scenario. You can recognize that in the world today there are only that black spots in the Sahara with a mean annual temperature higher than 29. Then obviously we have to many challenges for next years in order to adapt our cities, for example, to the heat island effect. No? There will be many population at risk, especially population more higher than 75 years, but also population that don't have enough income even to have air conditioning. Then there are many challenges even to the climatic variability. We'll have more draws, more extreme rainings like that. We live in the Mediterranean. We are based on near Barcelona, and we are used to that extreme events. But the frequency and the extension of that extreme events will be higher during next year, and then we will have to adapt. You can see here a figure of the importance of all the problems that we have from water, and you can see that, for example, about the people affected, more than 100 million people affected just per year. These are the last data that we found, data from 2018, and more than 100 million people affected by flooding, and more than 50 million people affected by drought. If we talk about the economic consequences, you can see that, well, a lot of problems by flooding and drought. And remember that we also have many waterborne diseases. Near 800,000 people die every year by different diseases that are transmitted by water. No? Then we have a lot of problems, and we live in a really crowded urban world. You can see the data that even in less developed countries and in more developed countries, population can increase, but is more important the extension of the urban increase. The urban extent is increasing more than population, and we can say, well, perhaps this extension of urbanization is produced with more planning during the last decades, but is not true. In fact, The urban planning is decreasing during the last century from near 80% of the urbanization in the planet to less than 50% today. Then we live in an overcrowded urban world with really not many urban planning. Fortunately, humans are able to adapt to all the extreme conditions. We know that even if we recognize the urban or the built environment, we recognize different examples of adaptation to extreme climate events or the extreme environments like that Morocco Medinas. And then people during centuries develop sociocultural, technical, and environmental systems over a determined area that are basic to for our adaptation. Today, well, some people like Carter told that this is the social fabric, the old experience, perception of the built environment that defines our social vulnerability, and it complements the biophysical vulnerability that is present in any geographic context. No? Then this social fabric is really basic. We know also as the traditional ecological knowledge, and then it's really important to recognize and recover, to understand how, for example, indigenous communities have recognized that ecological knowledge because it's a key for us in order to know our adaptation. Today, we can say that that community body of multi-generational knowledge, that these practices of the social fabric are really basic for our adaptation, and then even we can evolve from the Darwin survival of the fittest to the survival of the most symbiotic. No? Well, we learn a lot, for example, in many Latin American countries. For example, we work a lot in Bahia, in the northeastern Brazil, and we learn that they change from the old concept of the struggle against drought that the government say to a new concept of, no, we do not have to struggle against our environment. We have to live. We have to coexist with the semi-arid that is our environment. That this is the new approach. And we learn, for example, incredible examples of ancestral hydrotechnologies, like, for example, these from the Zenu Society. We can make that pictures from a drone during our last travel in February of 2020. And you can see that incredible hydrotechnologies from the Zenu Society built 400, 600 years before Christ, and they are working today. They build a really incredible complex hydraulic systems useful for flooding control. But these structures that you can see, that channels, that ditches, they told the camellones, are really useful for flooding control, but also in order to provide an environment for food, for agriculture, and for aquaculture. They turn the excess of water during the rainy season to advantage, and during the dry season, they can follow to maintain the crops. And today, we lost that experience. We lost the capacity, and during the rainy season, all is flooding, and we cannot cultivate the crops. And during the dry season, there is no enough water. No? Then this is what we say today, the incredible nexus, the nexus between food, water, energy, and ecosystem. No? And well, there are a lot of examples. For example, the amunas in Peru that obviously catch the raining in above 4,000 meters, and they drive slowly to a lower altitude, and they have a really big capacity. And today, some companies are beginning to restore some of that amunas in order to improve the availability of water in some areas, for example, in Peru. No? Then the question is, obviously we have to understand how these ancestral hydrotechnologies work, but even we can replicate these ancestral hydrotechnologies. And we have an incredible and beautiful example in Colombia, the Apropapur, an association of producers, fishermen, farmers, and agroecological artisans in Purísima, in Córdoba, Colombia, built in an area that they don't have Zenu channels. They built a new a replicate of that systems, and they achieve an incredible production of different agroecology products, no? Beans, watermelon, and they this was built by a community using the same procedures from the old Zenu society, and they achieve a really incredible livelihood for today agriculture people. No? Then just today we are recognizing here in Europe the importance of the nature-based solutions. Nature-based solutions, even in the framework, for example, of the new Green Deal agreement, are really important in order to adapt. Nature-based solutions is a novel concept that you can see here in a wall finding that it begins to appear in 2015, and it really increases, exponentially increases during the last 3 years, and is really important to use that nature-based solutions in order to configure new sets, new socio-technical and ecological systems, based most of them in our ancestral technologies. Just just to finish, we have 4 main principles in order to define the resilience. We have to learn to live with the change, because the world is changing, and we have some important uncertainty, and then we have to learn how we can adapt to that change. One important thing to live with change is to feed diversity in order to reorganize and renew our systems. The third thing is to improve the opportunity for self-organization, and to improve the connection between the different scales, between the local scale, the living scale, the regional scale, and connect all that scale. And finally, just to finish my presentation, obviously it's really important to combine different types of knowledge. We are at the university, but we recognize the really important traditional ecological knowledge. We find incredible professors of ecology in some local communities in Colombia, in Brazil, and we have to learn a lot from that communities in order to improve our adaptation. Okay, then I thank you for your attention. You can find here in our webpage some of that project. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jordi, and perfect timing. Thank you for catching up with the time. Water is linked to the way we inhabit the territory since the beginning of times, and perhaps in order to sustainably manage our heritage, we need to refer to ancestral rather than new approaches of water management strategies towards creating an effective water energy food nexus. This is food for thought. I would like to welcome our second speaker. I hope we have received the presentation yet. Rubén Pesci. Rubén is an architect and urban planner from Argentina. He's a recognized initiator in Latin America of thought and action with environmental criteria. He founded CEPA Foundation in La Plata in 1974, the first environmental NGO in the region. He did his doctoral studies in Madrid in sustainability and urban regeneration. He's one of the top developers of urban projects and plans in Latin America. 40 cities, from metropolis to large to small cities, were designed with his leadership. He created and developed the concept of ambitectura, something that could be translated into environmental architecture, building inspired by the environment. that he has applied to countless works of architecture, urban design, and development. He has received many awards and distinctions and has been working on La Plata and its region since the 1980s, especially on projects for the strategic development of the region and the consideration of La Plata as World Heritage. Rubén, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Can you see our image, please? Hay que pasar las imágenes.
Yo tengo que hacerlo, ¿no?
Las tienen ellos. Ustedes tienen las imágenes, ¿eh? Ahí está. Perfectly. Thank you very much. Well, I will present experiences and ideas for the sustainability of heritage, which we wish to call evolutionary project. Please. In Italo Calvino's Invisible Cities, the writer makes a profound criticism of untouchable conservations. But in vain I undertook the journey to visit the city, forced to remain immobile and equal to herself, to be better remembered. Sora languished, unrelevant and disappeared. The earth has forgotten it. Please. Conservation and development. The great writer Jorge Luis Borges from Argentina drew our attention to the false contradiction between conservation and development. It is useless to distinguish between conservation and development, because for eternity it is not possible to conserve without developing, nor to develop without conserving. Please. And in Siena, Italy, for more than 7 centuries, as an example, life has evolved without neglecting the heritage. It's incredible. The painting, the picture below from 1930, and the picture down with the use of the same square as a fiesta each year. Please, again. Mas how succeed this kind of problem? Evolutionary conservation cases. In species, conservation occurs thanks to evolution. Please. And in the habitat, in the territory, we are going to explain a little how to do with this castle in Verona, Italy. Please. El Museo Castelvecchio, Carlos Calpa, architecto, 1957. Also, Carlos Calpa taught us in 1957, we must act in the habitat and the territory. You can see that horse, that caballero, inside the Antigua structura and old structure, but with a modern language. Please. Reus, Italy, is a great experiment in that sense. The Italian landscape is full of forgotten historical buildings. The cultural project Reus Italy has the long-term goal of focusing the public attention on this issue, promoting activities that show how it is possible to bring back life inside those ruins, activating a renovation project. We believe that the refurbishment of the abandoned historical environment represents research for Italy, and the architectural project must have a fundamental role. Please. In the case of the Church of Grottole, an extensive reuse of the old church as a cultural center was proposed to revive the entire small town. please. And the path to reuse so many historical ruins is to integrate them with soft and light architectural design. Please. But, and in the case of natural heritage, the biosphere reserve of the island of Santa Catarina, Brazil, has achieved a good area of conservation of native forests, Atlantic forests, avoiding the permanent urban growth from the biosphere reserve model to a vision of the biosphere in an urban environment. Please. The territorial model of the biosphere reserve include not only the natural heritage core, but also a buffer area as well as a transition area. Please. But we introduce a new model, a proposal from 2005, which includes 5 types of areas, articulating the natural, the core, the buffer, the transition, again the buffer, and the urban core. We propose the integration of the natural and urban areas throughout articulation interface, seeking to contain urban growth and to safeguard the most valuable natural areas. It's going from the only one element to conserve to an entire system of the context integrate between the core, monumental core, urban or natural. Please. We propose moving of the current situation when a new surface area of the island is destined for urban growth to new situation where we are buffer areas and also transform it into a middle intervention model, articulating the natural and the urban core, and thus protecting a model of development articulated with conservation. You can see the difference between the first situation and the actual situation. Please. And what happened with a city, a great city, an important city? How can you articulate the conservation with the evolutionary situation of the society? The city has to be an evolutionary heritage. The aerial picture of the city of La Plata shows us its harmony and unitary design. After 100 years, 130 years, the center of La Plata remained as was designed in that times. Please. That was the original design. The drawing corresponds to the foundation of the city with the conception of a model of public and open spaces and a larger number of green spaces. After 140 years, the city, the urban design of La Plata remained the same. Again, next please, next. And in 1938, the city grew for 50 years following the pattern of its division of the block into smaller lots, generating a very homogeneous image of the entire urban fabric, where the monumental buildings arranged from the foundation in whole blocks stood out for their greater height and volume. Please. In 1921, now, the intense population growth and land occupation in the central areas or on the way to greater compactness as is preached today caused the alteration of the vertical harmony that disturbed the maintenance of the horizontal harmony, while a new harmony of green corridor grows by the streets and parks. Please. Now we are working with a new proposal with the hypothesis of the gradients. From the original harmony to a global harmony through the use of 8 gradients, initially the residential building was low 8 meters, but later it was increasing in a disorderly and exaggerated way. A recent standard tried to recover of higher harmony, which is often unattainable due to the type of subdivision of lot, and then it is not fulfilled. Finally, we have made a proposal to protect the low-rise buildings of the foundational type and promote growth in slimmer towers within the plot or by grouping small plots. Founding situation, you can see, no? Upper founding situation until 1940. Current situation today, please, again. Next. Future situation according to current regulation, much height above, and future situation according to the Zócalo proposed. Conservation of the small buildings, foundational and actual small buildings, and rise only in small towers. Equalize heights below. Please. In the electronic model, you can see how the urban and environmental model can be recovered through the use of the link that harmony is all new and the greater height in the axis of main avenues was among a greater density of the cement. Conservation and development can be articulated through a project that articulates this concept for the necessary evolution. Really, we are very, very, very happy to think that it's possible to evolutionary without destroying the monuments. That evolution also can be applied to the conservation. Please. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rubén. Just as a fun fact, Italo Calvino is one of my favorite authors, and I felt moved by his quote in the very beginning of your presentation. Thank you. The articulation of heritage with the urban environment at larger scale is without doubt something to keep in mind. Our next speaker is the coordinator of our sustainability team, Iggy Gildim. She is an urban planner and heritage conservation specialist with more than 20 years of experience working in Turkey and the whole world. Her work focuses on heritage policy and governance, UNESCO World Heritage, and sustainable development. She's based in Istanbul since 2013 as an independent consultant and scholar. Her previous work includes positions of conservation planner in Ankara, conservation coordinator at Abu Dhabi Authority for Culture and Heritage, consultant and site manager of the historic guild town of Muturnu, and key expert in the EU Turkey Anatolian Archaeology and Cultural Heritage Institute project, Gaziantep. Iggy was a Fulbright scholar at Pratt Institute in New York, and a J.M. Kaplan Fellow at Kos University in Istanbul. She has also served as the ICOMOS focal point for the UN Sustainable Development Goals and currently coordinates the thematic debate of the Our World Heritage Initiative. Ege, welcome. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
I would like to try to navigate the clicker myself, if you don't mind. Let me see if this works. It does. All right. Very good. So thank you very much, Pamela. It's an honor to be here with you, and what a pleasure to be part of the Heritage Forum of Central Europe, collaborating with Monica and Daniele's team and my wonderful co-conveners today. I think we have about 15 minutes, so I will start my stopwatch for that as well. So today I would like to present to you a dual set of experiences, one from the international level and one from the very opposite end of the spectrum, very local level. And it's all about cultural heritage, natural heritage, and how this connects to sustainability and the SDGs. So quite broad general concepts, and then some very specific examples and lessons learned. Just to set the scene, we all know that these, just to remind ourselves and put us in context, the 2030 Agenda is a plan for people, planet, and prosperity, and it's seeking to strengthen peace and doing this through partnerships, the 5 Ps of the UN Sustainable Development Agenda. And we're working at our World Heritage movement, of course, with the UNESCO World Heritage Convention. And this has been defined in the 2015 policy of UNESCO's on World Heritage and Sustainability as an integral part of UNESCO's mandate to foster equitable, sustainable development. And the way that we positioned this session was that the contribution of World Heritage to sustainable is great, but it has to be understood better, harnessed better, and it depends on a mutually beneficial and progressive relationship between heritage and development. Here you're seeing some of the icons of the UN sustainability agendas. You can say it's a family of agendas. The SDGs is the umbrella, the mother agenda. Then we have, of course, the climate emergency and the climate the COP process, of course, as well as the new urban agenda coordinated by UN Habitat. We also have other agendas about disaster reduction. Risk management is an important theme that we need to keep in mind, and financing for development. And I will come to financing at the end of my presentation. I give you a preview of my lesson learned about all of this. Financing is another key part. The economy, the economic inclusive economic development dimension of sustainability. So the SDGs call for localizing of all of these very important high-level concepts into our daily life, taking them from not only the international and national, but also to subnational local contexts, into the sites that we live in, we work in. This localization applies to world heritage, cultural heritage, just like any other sphere of development policy and city management, territorial management. And the World Heritage Sustainable Policy has taken this on board, of course, around the 4 pillars or their headings of environmental sustainability, inclusive social development, inclusive economic development, and peace and security. In our World Heritage Sustainability team, we have followed this general 4 sections framework, and we have tried to actually take it further and add the governance as an important part of peace and security. And the localizing effort within our World Heritage work, sustainability team work, is through the Case Studies project. And in July, if you can have a chance to follow some of our webinars during the July month of sustainability at OWH, you will see we have a collection of amazing, diverse case studies where all of the discussions come alive, the challenges, the opportunities, the lessons learned. And I've been working very recently on ICOMOS SDGs working group as the coordinator, the focal point of ICOMOS's working group on the SDGs. And while working on that high-level advocacy, I've also been working on my site where I was site manager, Mudurnu, Turkey. And it was a very interesting experience to live these together and compare and see the contrast, sometimes 2 different worlds, and how we're trying to take the ideas from one level to the other, and some are lost in translation. And there are reasons for why there are these losses in translation, in the difficulties in implementing the goals, and the difficulties in expressing the needs of the ground into higher decision making. So localizing as a governance tool, I think it's one of the key places where we are locked, and we need to unlock barriers. So let's move on to some more details on first the ICOMOS work that I was involved in. So I handed over my focal point role to Mr. Gabriel Caballero at the end of last year. I'm still working with the working group, as very engaged with it. And this has been one of the very fastest developing and naturally emerging priorities of ICOMOS. ICOMOS has actually declared a climate emergency last year in our General Assembly, and the SDGs is an integral part of the new projects, the board priorities, and ICOMOS has been actually talking about the relationship of heritage and development for a while now, since 2011, and the first major document on heritage as a driver of sustainable development. And now this primary global cultural heritage NGO of more than 10,000 members, 100 plus national committees, is really embracing its potential, its position to actually lead the heritage world community in terms of the experts network into being more engaged with socioeconomic problems, how to communicate to the society. This is also corresponding to Article 5 of the UNESCO World Heritage Convention, that heritage should have a life in the community, as you may recall. So the SDGs working group was is one of the 6 working groups of ICOMOS that are closely tied together. All of them have some sustainability relevance. We also have the climate change and heritage working group, the rights-based approaches working group, emerging professionals. This is important for the sustainability of the work, for handing it over to future generations of heritage experts, indigenous heritage working group, and one on Syria and Iraq, a crisis area where specific heritage work is being done, as well as the culture-nature journey, where the culture-nature integration is an emerging priority, of course. And ICOMOS, as you know, has been developing doctrine for decades now, since its foundation in the 1960s. We're an advisory body to UNESCO World Heritage Committee for cultural heritage. But increasingly, the way that we see cultural heritage is becoming blurred, and natural heritage and cultural heritage, where do you draw the line? The fact that these need to be much better integrated in our practice and in our scholarly work is now becoming undeniable. So sometimes we're talking about just heritage, not cultural heritage. And the UNESCO World Heritage Convention is in the same spirit of actually taking them together. It's actually visionary in that respect. So it's a great net resource for the community of heritage and development. You can follow the work of the SDGs working group at the link provided. We have an action plan from 2017 that we're following, with some major priority actions on policy guidance and engaging with the UN high-level political forum, national liaisons and localizing world heritage, urban partnerships and the new urban agenda, metrics and indicators, and fundraising and human resources. Here's some more information on the major documents that we've been producing since the Paris Declaration in 2011 that I mentioned. Most recently, we have issued the policy guidance on heritage and the SDGs just this year in March. The Climate Change and Heritage Report of 2019 is also seminal. And there are larger networks. And, it's all about networking these days to actually grow knowledge and transform knowledge into policy and action and make real change in the ground. You need to partner up with like-minded organizations, or actually reach out to perhaps unconventional, not so like-minded other stakeholders to explore how to better communicate, how to solve conflicts, how to see trade-offs. we are very much at home in our Culture 2030 goal campaign with several other international cultural networks. This is advocating for a culture goal in the SDGs. So in the next iteration of the UN agenda in 2045, we really need to see one on culture. We have a target 11.4 in this period for cultural and natural heritage. That is great. But there are many other contributions of culture that are not really recognized enough in the whole sustainability debate. And that's one advocacy part that we do. The Climate Heritage Network that ICOMOS coordinates is also gathering different sectors and levels of stakeholders, organizations, to see how arts, culture, and heritage has a big contribution to make. We already saw from our previous presentations about the ancient hydrotechnologies, how that can be harnessed for climate action. This is something that we need to tell the whole world. You know, how do you advocate the scientific knowledge into popular discussion, how to get it into popular opinion and decision makers, make it mainstream in society. That's also part of the work. We also have some memorandum of understanding with UN Habitat and Global Heritage Fund and some other organizations. That is part of the 5th P, the partnerships idea in the 2030 agenda. Before moving on to the local level, I'd like to just dwell a little bit more on this very recent publication that we issued at ICOMOS, the Policy Guidance on Heritage and the SDGs. You can download it from the ICOMOS website. Please do have a look. We are trying to promote it because the actual idea here was to provide a resource for everybody, very simple to use, very clear guidelines, just to see how heritage connects to each and every one of the SDGs. Every goal, there is something that heritage can contribute, which needs to be integrated. Heritage needs to be protected from harm during development processes. And also we need to be self-critical and improve heritage practice so that we're better aligned with sustainability objectives. There are case studies for each goal in the document. Now we are moving on to an implementation strategy for phase 2, where we can translate these into more concrete, measurable actions and also support a case studies database. We need more knowledge, qualitative and quantitative, because a lot of the development world speaks with hard figures and statistics. And the heritage world doesn't traditionally work with a lot of statistical data, economic data, and this has to be enhanced, is one of our findings. And a lot of case studies make the point with qualitative data as well, and they are contextualized to the local environment, which is valuable. That's how things can be implemented. And this can all be done with stakeholders, of course, so that's continuing. And what does this all say about a little site in Turkey like Mudurnu, where I've had a very long-standing personal investment, engagement. So this can be one of the case studies just that we're talking about. But it has been full of challenges, difficulties, some disappointments, but still it's a very valuable experience and still continuing. It was one of my PhD case studies for a small economically depressed town. So how can we actually support culture-based, sustainable tourism-based development, harnessing cultural heritage and also the natural environmental resources of a small town in a very foresty and rich natural environment of Turkey. The province where Mudurnu is located is 60% covered with forests, a lot of biodiversity as well, and the nature is just as strong as the very important historic significance on the Silk Road of this town, which has been forgotten in the past decades. The economic crisis of 2001 really hit the economy hard, and they've been trying to revitalize the economy through cultural tourism for some years. And that's where I came in with a postdoc on a site management plan, which became official. I was the author with my team of the management plan that was adopted and has been implemented since 2015. And the principles weren't really thinking about the SDGs when we were preparing this plan, but they do actually fit with the principles of sustainability. They're kind of universal, and not only about heritage, but also education, awareness raising, developing other economic sectors, risk management. These were part of the headings that we were dwelling on in the management plan. And the implementation process of the plan involved many different kinds of projects, small or little. A lot of them were soft projects. You know, they were not actually construction works. And the community sometimes does not understand how site management works when they don't see a physical thing. But we've done a lot of training, a lot of meetings, a lot of organizing, some public image, like the logo was created by a national competition, and the Cheetah Slow network, we were very lucky to join. We applied and got in 2018. And there was a long process of the UNESCO World Heritage nomination. We're still on the tentative list, but then the actual nomination file that we prepared, unfortunately did not make it to the list. It was withdrawn a few weeks before the committee session in 2019. And that's when the mayoral elections also took place. So the mayor changed, the leadership changed, and there was a breaking point in the whole continuity. So the governance system kind of changed. And after a while, I was also not reappointed. The site manager changed. And for a while, there was a kind of fall, let's say. It seems to be in hiatus. We have a new site manager. Not much is happening as we observe. And we're looking at the reasons why this nomination failed in a way. And I still believe that there's potential OUV, but I think there needed to be more investment into more research and also conservation. It comes down to institutional support and money and human resources, human capital and monetary capital. You can see here a very rough estimate of how much money we need to actually do the conservation work, to be better prepared for a new nomination, also for some more research, as I said. So $5 million US. Very rough figure, but you know, we need to think about these economic figures more and more, if you, in my view. I would like to, I'm sorry, a little bit over time, but almost finished. You may actually have heard of Mudurnu through this crazy project called Burj El Babas. This is a ghost town of a few hundred chateaus that were marketed to Gulf tourists, and the whole project failed and it went bankrupt. And now there's a very strange ghost town a little bit outside the city center in Mudurnu. Thankfully, it's not visible from the historic city center. So here you see the contrasting landscapes from the real Mudurnu, I would say, the one that's a World Heritage candidate, and the Cheetah Slow or Heritage Mudurnu, and the Resort Mudurnu. And when you compare the approaches of the concepts of these different visions of the town's future, you can see one is more inclusive. It helps the locals. It coordinates stakeholders. It looks at the commons and communal well-being. And the other one is more about focusing prosperity on the investor. And sooner or later, maybe one day, the locals will benefit, but it's not very clear how. And the consumption pattern is extremely aggressive. No respect for the local context, as you can see. Fantasy chateaus, completely made up. And it has been producing tensions in the community. And we are trying to operate in this environment. It's been interesting to have Mudurnu in the news, in the New York Times, in the BBC. It's an emerging dark tourism destination, but there is still a possibility to actually turn this around and still advocate for a more sustainable vision of development for such a small town. And I'm personally still invested, not as a site manager anymore, but I've actually invested financially into real estate. And now we're creating a new incorporated joint stock company. Actually, it's going to be open to shareholders. If anybody's interested to be part of this new venture, you're welcome to speak to me. And there's also this kind of shared ownership to soften gentrification. There have been interested parties from bigger cities, Istanbul, Ankara in Turkey, buying these beautiful historic houses in Mudurnu for very cheap prices. So there might be some real estate boom in some years. But what about the change in social fabric, the gentrification risks? And here we are actually partnering with the original owners. We are shareholders with them, doing it together. They're still part of the ecosystem. Right now, the implementation works are ongoing, and it will be hopefully a mixed use of private residence and tourism, cultural activity centers. You can follow it through Instagram. We're also also part of a new international sustainable tourism platform. So new things might happen. But in terms of the conclusions, I think showing alternative models for people to see what can be done to catalyze good practice for smaller communities especially. Because you see, the Burj El Babas investment, it sparked the imagination of some people in the community as the future of their economic salvation. But is it really a salvation? Maybe they don't know that there are better models out there. And for smaller communities, all of our sophisticated concepts sometimes have no meaning, unless you explain it in the right language. And so that's why I'm saying here the UNESCO World Heritage Convention or the 2030 Agenda, these are only meaningful and real with local engagement. It's very difficult to do when there are smaller and very few resources, a lot of capacity, awareness raising, policy investment, and communication between different levels of governance, diversifying funding and organizing models, and diversifying the labels, the networks you want to go into. It doesn't have to be World Heritage for everywhere, or World Heritage is one way to support the real thing, which is the sustainable development pathway. And resilience at the end of the day, both socioeconomic, environmental, and institutional, comes with a flexibility and a long-term vision. Also using digital technologies and social media to organize, so being open to new opportunities and never giving up. I think that's the last word I want to leave you with. Thank you very much for your time, and apologies for going over time. I got a little excited about my little passionate projects with you. Yes, thank you.
Thank you very much, Iggy. The integration of cultural and natural heritage is indeed a pending issue, but your engagements in Mudurnu have shown us that a way to address it is by landing the international strategies into the local context through policy and action, with stakeholder engagement as an essential strategy to achieve the SDGs. Thank you very much, Iggy. Our last speaker for today is Dr. Cornelius Rudolph. Cornelius is a professor of archaeology and holds a UNESCO chair on heritage futures at Linnaeus University in Kalmar, Sweden, where he is also directing the graduate school in contract archaeology. In his research, he is particularly interested in contemporary archaeology, heritage theory, and heritage futures, with numerous international publications in these areas. Most recently, he co-edited the book Cultural Heritage and the Future. I hope you can tell us where to get it. Please, Cornelius, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Well, you can get it from any good bookstore, as they say. It's published by Routledge. Now, what I would like to talk to you about is about how, in my view, cultural heritage can strengthen human resilience. And as has already been mentioned, I'm representing here Linnaeus University in the southeast of Sweden and the UNESCO chair on heritage futures. One thing actually curiously that we haven't talked about so much in this session is what actually is resilience. And obviously it's not always easy to define these terms, but there are a few things that I think most of us can agree. This is about, except from never giving up. But it certainly is about the capability of absorbing adversity. It's about adapting, about changing, and about developing. And actually, I find that many of these terms are quite similar to what Rubén was talking about earlier in relation to Borges, for example. So there's certainly links between our different presentations here. Now, cultural heritage, on the other hand, that's something we are all very familiar with, and that is to do with quite a different kind of desire. This is about conserving, protecting, safeguarding, and preserving, and other terms in that family of words. So this is rather a different approach to resilience, and maybe it's not surprising that the term has come into the heritage discourse only quite recently, and for many years it didn't really occur in the heritage context. So what I want to talk about initially here is how can cultural heritage and resilience actually be made compatible with each other, because they have so different directions. Is it change or is it conservation that we're dealing with? Or rather, how are the two connected? Now, what I would argue is that cultural heritage can align with resilience to the extent that heritage is seen in terms of change. And again, that's something we heard about before from Rubén, not the least, but also Giordi was mentioning that we have to learn to live with change and uncertainty. But maybe in the heritage discourse, this idea of change could be stronger rooted and applied to more aspects than just some of them. I realize it's probably best rooted in the architecture department of the heritage field, but of course there are many other fields where it isn't as prominent at the moment. Very often the question that is raised most prominently from heritage people is this one: how much change and development can we tolerate in heritage? So it's always seen that that our default position is that we try to conserve something, but yes, we need to be pragmatic and make concessions and so on, and we tolerate a certain amount of change. Now, that's not necessarily helpful. So what I think would be more useful to consider is which change and development do we actually want for heritage? Which direction do we want to go? And I think that relates also back to what Iggy was talking about just now. In this particular case in Moduro, what is the best strategy to go forward? Because two strategies have been tried, and as I understand it from her presentation, both have failed so far, at least. So what is the strategy, the perspective for the future that may want to go from now on? So you could say that this issue of focusing on change and development is particularly significant today at the time when we're living in the Anthropocene, with everything that is part of it, not the least climate change. Because that's a situation where we need to look forward rather than backward, and where we need to promote change rather than conservation. And maybe this is why the notion of resilience is so particularly important at the moment, and also why it has come to the fore in the way it has. So the abstract said that we should all present a case study. So I was thinking, what could I choose as a case study? So this is the castle in the town where I live in Kalmar. And I want to present very briefly Kalmar Castle as a story of change, because I am arguing that you can tell the story of heritage, in fact, probably any heritage, as much as about a story of continuity and preservation, as you can tell it in terms of change, transformation, and development. And that's in a way an obvious point, but still it's not always done. It's very often presented as a continuity, as something that survives, that continues in some kind of essence. Now, in terms of Kalmar Castle, this originated in the early 12th century, but most of what you see is actually from the past 150 years. And that's not unusual. A lot of heritage sites were refurbished and redone in recent decades, and more or less over the last 1.5 or 1 to 2 centuries, whereas there's a very long history before that. Now, in terms of Kalmar Castle, this is a picture. I can make it a little bit bigger here, which shows the remains of the earliest phase of the castle, which was actually a fortified tower built at around 1100 or shortly afterwards. And this is an old picture which I found from excavations that took place during the 1930s. So this is more or less everything that is left from the very oldest phase. Everything else is more recent than that. Right. Then a few decades later, this is the earliest castle, and you see this here is the fortified tower I showed you earlier. And then they basically built a wall around it and added a gate. And that was the earliest castle. It didn't resemble very much what we see today, but this is what it looked like. And then over the next few hundred years, it developed. And in 1687, we have this picture of Kalmar Castle. And so this is the heyday of Sweden. Since then, it has gone downhill, you can argue, possibly. And you see the castle in its full view and quite precious and makes a good, also a very important fortification at that time against the Danish, actually, or just before that. Now, since then, over the next 200 years, the whole thing fell into disrepair. And the picture from 200 years later, 1867, actually looks much more sad. This is the situation that the castle was in. It's about 150 years ago. And after that, they started investing and changing not just the character, but also the users and everything really of this castle. And again, of course, I think this is quite typical for many other structures like this. It's far from unique. That's the point of presenting it. So what they've added since then, among other things, is a completely new roof, is exhibition spaces and meeting rooms, also offices inside. There is a restaurant with a full kitchen. There is a shop, of course, a concert room. There's a working chapel for modern day weddings. They put in a lift so you can connect different floors, and toilets, of course, and a lot of other things that are part of a modern visitor destination. And of course, that again, that's not surprising, but this is something you see in many places. So what that shows us that really is a monument. It's not a medieval fortification. This is a monument of change, transformation, and adaptation. And it is a modern tourist destination and also a venue for different kind of events today. And this is what heritage means in so many cases, that it's being used in a contemporary setting. And that's what the site ultimately signifies today. So you can say, and what you see in the history, that it has been repeatedly absorbing adversity, has been adapting to new circumstances, has been changing its functions and the kind of people who would go there or visit or use it, and it has been developing continuously during the long history of its existence. So Kalmar Castle, you could argue, is a monument to resilience. It's not a monument of medieval fortifications, but it is a monument of change, and it manifests and exemplifies resilience, really, in that sense. So what I'm arguing is that it makes sense to look at heritage in terms of how it has been changing over long time spans, rather than in terms of what has been preserved and what has stayed the same. And I think it's easy to write a story like this in many cases for all kinds of heritage, because this is quite typical that this happens. So, well, this leaves us today, and that's the interesting question, maybe. What are we to discuss now? Then I think the question is, what is going to be next for Kalmar Castle? And at the moment, we're still firmly part of this heritage discourse, but we also see that with climate change and with the sustainability agenda, that there are a whole range of broader aims than just visitor destination and making money in an economic context, but there are many other aspects that need to be developed more closely over the next decades. And that's not the least what the Agenda 2030 is pointing us to, and what the post-2030 agenda will also make us do, focus on a longer perspective and the new agenda. So I think in terms of heritage management, the interesting question here that should be in the foreground and govern the discussions we are having is, where do we want to go next? What do we want to have here? What do we want the castle to do? What is going to be its function in the future? How can it influence certain developments that maybe we would like to see? And yes, of course, that is a process that has to be locally anchored and has to be done together with the municipality and the various communities that live here. Right. So in the end, I mentioned earlier that we're working under the label of Heritage Futures, but I didn't really explain what that meant. And here's the definition we're using. Heritage Futures are about the roles of heritage and managing the relations between present and future societies. So it's not about predicting what the future will bring, and it's not about preserving heritage as long as possible into the future, but it's about negotiating these relations between today and the future. Which way do we want to go? What is important in the future? What should we be doing with the power that heritage has? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Cornelius. Heritage, as you wisely said, is not only about the past, but about linking the past to the future. The persistence of the memory and identity through heritage conservation, but also through transformation, as you have witnessed in Kalmar Castle, is key to strengthen our human resilience. Each speaker has rendered a core concept revolving around heritage, water and climate change, urban environment, SDGs and site management, and human resilience. I have to say, the presentations have been stimulating and easy to relate to because they depicted different cases around the world where we could see these core concepts applied. Now, in a global context, with impelling emerging problems such as water scarcity and droughts, urban growth pressure engulfing natural areas and heritage sites, built and intangible assets being progressively destroyed due to economic growth and also due to conflict. How could we bring cultural heritage to the front line for it to be a strategy for resilience and community building rather than just one of the many different elements afflicted by global issues? I pose this question to our panel today, and I can see, well, by Cornelius' smile, that he has something to say about it.
Well, I'm sure we've all got something to say about it, but I can start if you like.
Please.
I mean, this is a big question, obviously, and a very important question. But I would give an answer like this. It's obvious that heritage studies, over the short time of its existence, I mean, it's only been around since the 1980s at best. It has come a long way, and it really has developed a whole new set of agendas where one focuses on social processes a lot more than on fabric, for example. And there's also a lot of critical attention being given to how heritage is used and in what context people benefit from it, and so on. But I still think, and that's my answer, that we can realize the unique potential of heritage even further. I think we can do even more, and that connects to some of what I've been talking about earlier. I think it's still too much locked to understandings that, or heritage is still too much locked to the notion of the past, to conservation, and also to exclusive identities. It's still too much that is relevant for some people rather than others. It's always about drawing boundaries. It's about conserving things that were before, and it's about histories and origin stories. And I think we could work much more with the opposite of these three things. I think we should be working more future-oriented, which is what I was talking about earlier. In which directions do we want to go, or do we feel we have to go for in our own best interest? What sort of change do we want to see? Because not everything is positive in our world, obviously. There are many big challenges ahead also. And also part of heritage is not positive. If you think about gender equality, then this is not always the aspect that is best represented through historical perspective and through the heritage. And there are other examples like this. So I think we need to work more proactively with the sort of change we want. And the final point is that I think we also need to try to find a heritage that is more inclusive, rather than dividing societies up into different kinds of groups that have different heritages and that define themselves as one group and other people as not part of their group. So it's very often we and them. I think we should try to find heritage and support heritage that is more integrative and inclusive, and sort of creates narratives and stories that can bring societies together and create cohesion rather than division. So that's my short answer.
Thank you very much, Cornelius. Thank you. Iggy, would you like to reply?
Of course, thank you. Well, I do agree with Cornelius very much, especially with keeping up with change in a more conscious way, and understanding that the only constant is change. Change management is part of conservation. And also the emphasis on inclusion that Cornelius made. I think that's key. And to add on that, in terms of mainstreaming cultural heritage, I think we're still growing out of our shell, breaking our shell and growing our muscles and expanding into a wider world where things are not comfortable or neat, but complicated, and there are other stakeholders, and heritage as a sector or cultural heritage expert communities, I think, need to be diluted with hybrid models, economists or gender. Cornelius talked about women's rights activists, and using the potential of heritage in a positive way, the problems of heritage, resolve it and adapt it with climate action as well. A lot of the burning issues of today, the climate crisis, the biodiversity crisis, the equity crisis, the poverty gap and conflicts, humanitarian crises, these are all related, and our heritage business has a role to play in all of that. So we have to see it ourselves, explore it, and tell it. Be good storytellers, be good negotiators, be good collaborators. And recently, I've been seeing some really interesting examples. For example, in Istanbul, I'm very much involved. This year, interestingly, I've been involved with Istanbul municipality through several threads. I'm part of the Istanbul Citizens Assembly Cultural Heritage Working Group. I'm part of their 2050 vision plan for Istanbul, advisory group on culture and heritage. I'm also doing consultancy for some urban design and historic districts. So I've been able to observe what's going on in the discussions in Istanbul right now. We have a progressive government. You have to seize the opportunities of when there's a good atmosphere, when you can actually have dialogue and influence or talk about policy with decision makers. And we were in a workshop a few days ago for the Plan 2050, and they put together a few headings which were not only heritage, but the natural environment, biodiversity, and let me see, a few more, which were mainly grouped around vulnerable groups. We can position ourselves as one of the vulnerable groups, one of the vulnerable assets, resources that needs to be protected in the face of aggressive development, unsustainable capitalist development, development that sees everything through just dollar signs, not appreciating the other non-monetary values that we need to think about when we're planning for cost-benefit analyses. So I think when we join forces with these vulnerable groups, it makes much more sense. The policies, the advocacies get stronger, and we learn from each other. I think throughout the advocacy work at ICOMOS, when we speak to other non-state actors at these UN meetings, women, for example, children and youth, indigenous, some of them have very powerful voices, or they've been organizing very well, and a lot of our issues overlap. And that's just one way to get out of our silos and work together with our allies, and I think this happens in all levels. You can do it within your city. I'm trying to be involved more with Istanbul and Mudurnu in a way. Mudurnu is a special case. It's very small. I suppose every size, every scale of governance, a metropolitan area, a small rural settlement, a region, some national policies, they have to have their customized approaches. So I think we have to get better at our communication strategies and explain what we can contribute to the different levels of stakeholders and decision makers in different ways, whichever works, whichever will get results, and be involved in different kinds of communities. So I'm looking at it from a social engagement perspective, I think. I think then that's what I can say for now, and leave it to the next speaker. Thank you, Pamela.
Thank you very much, Iggy. I would like to yield the floor now to Jordi, please.
Yes. No, I agree with both that change is basic, is a characteristic of all sociological systems, but change generates fear in most of the people that is working in business as usual. No? Then heritage is really important, and it's a really a key aspect in if we want to evolve from that business as usual. No, from our experience, mainly in Europe and in Latin America, we know that we have a lot of work to do. Today, there are a lot of indigenous people that are in danger during recent years. Many of the knowledge generated during centuries is in danger, and then obviously the disappear of and the extinction, this knowledge is really difficult, or in some cases is really impossible to recover. No? Then I think that we have a work to recover, to understand some of that knowledge, and we have to look forward with that past knowledge, no? And obviously this is necessary in order to transform many of the processes that we have today. This applies in many guidelines, in many legislations. Here in Europe, we are engaging in the new Green Deal. We want to transform Europe as the first neutral carbon continent in 2015. But in many cases, culture is like the poor sister. No? And then, for example, about resilience, and when many people talk about urban resilience, there's different concepts applying, but in many cases there's a big a way going through a more risk and services approach. No? And I think that culture is not always represented. And then we together in an interdisciplinary way, we have to collaborate in networks, in different networks, in order to improve the obviously the taking action from that cultural strategy and about the heritage.
Thank you very much, Jordi. I hope you allow me this translation to Spanish to make the same question to Rubén. He will be replying in Spanish, but you will receive, we have now the support from Leo Viñol in the chat. He will be translating his answers in the chat to English for everybody to understand. Rubén, la pregunta es, ¿cómo podemos traer a la primera línea el patrimonio cultural para que sea más una estrategia para la resiliencia y para construir comunidades, más que sea uno de los tantos elementos afectados, ¿no? por las cuestiones globales? Lo que Cornelius nos ha explicado es la necesidad de integrar la cuestión de la equidad. Iggy nos habló de las distintas crisis ambientales, también de equidad económica, climática, y de la necesidad de unir fuerzas con los grupos más vulnerables. En este aspecto, Jordi también nos habló de la necesidad de unir fuerzas con las personas indígenas que están también en peligro, con la idea de que que la idea no siempre está bien representada, y la palabra clave para todos ha sido la colaboración. ¿Tienes algo que aportar al respecto, Rubén, por favor? No te escuchamos. We cannot hear Rubén at the moment. So we are asking here for some technical assistance.
Did he mute himself by mistake at the bar below?
It seems that.
No, no te podemos escuchar. Oh, this is a pity, because I'm sure that his contribution would be very, very interesting. I would like to remind you that the floor is open for to questions from the audience. We have a couple of comments in the chat. One of them is from Beata Michiel to Iggy. She says that Mudurno is
Ahora
a place
sí.
where she has been a long time ago. Ahora
A
te
ver, a
escuchamos.
ver, a ver.
Danos un momento.
Ah, bueno, muy bien, me alegro mucho. Bueno, muchísimas gracias por esta ocasión. Aprovecho este minuto para agradecer muchísimo a Mónica Bahía, a Daniele Pini, por este espléndido momento que estamos viviendo, y por supuesto a mis colegas Edge, nuestra coordinadora magnífica siempre, y con ideas muy buenas, a Jordi, bueno, es un colega de Flacam, así que no tengo mucho que agregar. Pamela es una amiga directa. Y Cornelius, qué simpatía con lo que has mostrado, Cornelius. ¿Se ha escuchado?
Sí.
Hola, ¿se escuchó?
Sí, muchas gracias.
Bueno, muy bien. Voy a la pregunta. Para mí el problema es que se ha distorsionado, deformado y minimizado el sentido de cultura. Cultura es todo esto. Cultura es nuestra visión de la naturaleza, porque somos nosotros los que la interpretamos. Cultura es la vida. ¿Qué otra cosa es la vida que una vida en la cultura que vamos desarrollando? Entonces, estas divisiones pertenecen a una época pretérita que ya tiene 50, 70, 80, 100 años y mucho más, en el cual dividíamos natural de cultural, espiritual de material. Son todas divisiones abstractas que hemos hecho y que a partir de la visión sistémica y de la gran contribución de la ecología, nos enseñaron que todo es parte, como bien dijo Friedrich Capra, la trama de la vida. La trama de la vida. Si quitamos eso, ¿cómo no iba a evolucionar el castillo maravilloso que nos mostró Cornelius? ¿Cómo iba a permanecer como una ruina por la eternidad? ¡Qué pena hubiera sido! ¿Cómo no íbamos a evolucionar todos nosotros, encontrándonos en una visión global y al mismo tiempo la importancia de lo local, como Mudurno que mostró ella? Yo creo que el problema central es superar la visión disciplinaria, superar la visión interdisciplinaria, que son viejas ya son viejas. Y como UNESCO viene diciendo hace mucho tiempo, 3, 4 décadas, 5 décadas, tenemos que entrar de lleno en la visión transdisciplinaria, donde la cultura es el camino de articulación entre indígenas y, entre comillas, civilizados, que por ahí lo somos menos que aquellos, donde cultura es la integración de material y espiritual, de naturaleza y cultura, de tangible e intangible. Yo siempre me baso, y con esto voy redondeando la respuesta, en la idea de los ecosistemas, que son funciones y hábitat y funciones. Si separamos, no existen los ecosistemas, mueren. Entonces, nuestra tarea con el patrimonio es hacerlo futuro, como dice Cornelius. Nuestra tarea con el patrimonio es que sean siempre manifestaciones de una cultura en evolución, de una cultura viva. Y para eso quiero llamar la atención, entre otros, a una reconversión de la tarea de los arquitectos, en particular, que tienen que no olvidar que detrás de un objeto, de un monumento, de un elemento singular, hay un contexto que todo lo explica, que todo lo integra. Proyectar contextos incluyendo la conservación del pasado. Gracias.
Thank you very much, Rubén. In line with your comment, we have a very interesting transdisciplinary panel today. We have a microbiologist, an architect, an urban planner, an archaeologist, and this gives us the chance to have multiple perspectives on the same issue. It's fascinating. Now, with the general idea of collaboration and keeping alive culture, understanding traditional approaches as freezing heritage in time with the sole purpose of contemplation for the sake of preserving it. What are your ideas towards innovative heritage approaches? I would like to start with Jordi, please.
Sorry, about the innovative ideas?
Innovative heritage approaches versus traditional approaches.
Well, what a question. It's not so easy to, but I think it's in the line that we were talking, no? I even can differentiate between, well, obviously there's a traditional, again, business as usual approach, but we need to understand that the world is changing, but now it's changing really in a higher pace than never before. Then even the scientists that are working from ecology, obviously the resilience is the basis of all sociological systems. But if the change is so fast, it could be some problems in order to adapt to that pace of change. Then today we are in transition, and then today we need to understand how we can take profit from some learnings from the past and use from the future. No? And then in our case that we work around water and the relation with water ecosystems and food in around the nexus, well, we try to understand how, for example, we can produce more or similar amount of food with less energy, less water, because we'll have problems because temperature increase, and then obviously we have problems with the conservation of water, and then without harming our ecosystems, no? Because our effects on biodiversity is one of the really important problems that we have. Then I think that here, sure that there are different point of views and different views, but we have together achieved that transdisciplinarity in order to evolve and to learn to live with change. And this is not easy because I agree with Rubén. In many cases, the unidisciplinarity is the basis, no? And then we have to understand even the architects with biologists, with people from social science, from economy, how we can learn together and discover other ways. No? We define at definition of new sets and new sociological and technical systems, where culture, obviously, and heritage, it could be one of the bases of that new sets. Well, we can have more things, but obviously I prefer that the other colleagues can talk.
Thank you. Iggy, would you like to reply, please?
Thank you. I will, but I just need to help with some logistics at this point, because people are asking about Rubén's translation, and also I think there's a question from Monica that she had difficulty conveying. So will we get a version in English, a summary of Rubén's earlier comment? Maybe Pamela,
it's in the chat.
Is it?
Yes, but I think we don't see the same chat as the general public.
So the general public has seen the translation. Okay, then. Sorry, I'm just trying to help. That's great.
Thank you for stepping in, Iggy. And Monica would like to ask a question. But, Monica,
yes,
would you hold
I have a question.
after?
Sure, of course.
Thank you very much.
So who's next? Who's speaking?
You, please.
Oh, okay. Well, very quickly, I'd just like to make 2 points on digital technology, artificial intelligence. You know, the algorithms, they're coming. Apparently, this will really, really transform us even faster. And what does heritage have to say? How do we position heritage in terms of the biotechnological revolution and the information technology, of course, transformation? And secondly, the youth. Think about Fridays for Future. Think about Greta Thunberg's generation. The new generation, the millennials, they are a different species it seems, from Generation X, and they are already navigating better than us in this new world of digital technology and artificial intelligence, and they have better tools, and some of them are much more awakened to the meaning of the crises that we are facing. And in ICOMOS, I see that younger professionals are leading the way in terms of the decolonization discourse, for example, the inclusion, diversity discourse. So I think as long as we give youth a proper space and voice and integrate younger voices, that will keep us at least close to where we need to be. As Cornelius said, we have to run faster to just keep in our place. And I think we need young people's energy and ideas, and then we'll probably be fine. Thank you.
Thank you, Iggy. Cornelius, please.
Yeah, well, I think I agree with what has been said before. In a way, your question supposes a division that doesn't really exist like that, because as Jordi was pointing out, the world is already changing so quickly at the moment, maybe faster than ever, that we just need to do our best in order to keep track of everything that surrounds us. So that's why I put in our chat this quote from Alice in Wonderland, that we need to run as fast as we can just to stay in the same place. So it does require an awful lot of innovation just to be able to be traditional, just to be able to conserve something, just to have sort of some kind of continuity. And I think that's also what Iggy was talking about. So obviously we need a lot of innovation, and obviously we need to come this from all kinds of direction, and of course a lot of that will come from young people who are more on top of the technology than maybe we are, and have different attitudes. I think that's it from me.
Thank you very much, Cornelius. Monica, you had a question.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Just a moment. Well, my question is, first of all, I would like very much to thank and congratulate Giordi, Rubén, Iggy, and Cornelius for this their insightful presentations and inputs in the debate. And my question is, recalling what Jukka Jokilaito stated, and I quote, the international criteria for conservation cannot be taken as a template, but rather as a methodological framework. I would like to hear the panelists about what could be relevant recommendations to improve the methodological framework of the World Heritage System in order to improve the alignment with the SDGs, to embrace a more systemic approach, including how to rethink the application of the 10 UNESCO criteria. And I take the opportunity as well to invite you to check out our today and tomorrow sessions and the schedule of the second week of the Globular New Approaches, Globular New Heritage Approaches. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Monica. I yield the floor to the panelists.
Cornelius? Or?
I don't have to start?
Please.
Please. Rubén.
Please, Cornelius, the floor is yours.
Okay, I'll be brief. Obviously, the World Heritage Convention is 50 years old soon, so there's an awful lot that would need to be changed. It's based on a completely different paradigm, a different way of thinking, which of course was extremely valuable at the time, but it's no longer current in so many different ways today. So I think if it can be rescued at all, it needs quite a thorough reworking. Just to give two examples, one is the notion of authenticity that you all know how difficult this has been, and even those who are working within the convention have trouble actually using this concept, and there are not many World Heritage nominations that have actually used some of the bigger perspective that the NARA document has introduced. It's still sort of stuck somewhere in old thinking, and now on top of what NARA has already done, we also see now the technical possibilities that were just mentioned with 3D printing and all kinds of possibilities of reproduction that were never thought to be possible at the time when the convention was passed. So it's a different framework, and people react very differently to copies today than they did directly after the Second World War. And we see this not just in far away from some of us, but we see it everywhere around the world. Even in Central Europe, you get all kinds of reproduction, historic rebuildings being done, and they are widely accepted by people, even though they know they're not old, but it's good enough. And none of that was foreseeable, I think, in the conservation framework based on Venice and also the World Heritage context. And another example is the idea of the communities. That's, of course, still very important. But what a community is changing through all the globalism that has taken place and the internet and all these distributed technologies that we see now. So we get communities that are no longer local, but they're still organized and they still have vested interest in something, and some of that concerns heritage. So the idea of distributed communities, how does that fit into the World Heritage Convention? I think that's also difficult and will require or would require some kind of modifications. These are just two examples that come into my mind from the like spontaneously, but there is so much more. The whole notion of heritage has changed. There was no heritage studies in 1972, and there's a whole range of different issues that are on the top of all our minds today that I think would need to be addressed in some form.
Thank you, Cornelius. Rubén, you wanted to say something. Please.
A ver si me escuchan bien, ¿sí?
Sí.
Sí. Muy breve, para facilitar la traducción. Yo creo que hay que integrar la metodología del diálogo, porque no es suficiente decir participación si no comprendemos lo que significa la dialéctica como método reflexivo crítico, con la metodología del paisaje, que sabe leer los patrones de lo construido, de lo natural, de lo grande, lo pequeño, que ya no distingue objetos de contexto, sino que los integra. Ir a la sociedad, a la comunidad, a la academia con un método de lectura del paisaje integral y un diálogo con todos los sectores de la sociedad. Gracias.
Perfeito. Thank you. Thank you,
Thanks,
Cornelius,
Rubén.
as well, for your answer.
Jordi, would you like to reply to that
Yes.
very briefly?
Yes, briefly, obviously, again, we are changing. And then, for example, the international criteria for conservation today are, or should be really radically different. For example, there's a famous case of an eagle that lived some years before in a World Heritage forest near Barcelona in the Montseny mountain area. Today, that eagle lives in the famous heritage of Sagrada Familia in the tower, because they find more fit in the urban environment than in a boring forest in a World Heritage landscape. No, then perhaps an all criteria of conservation produce a forest environment that with less diversity. No, then we have to understand that perhaps most of the, for example, the European landscape are made in an evolution with humans, no? And then thinking in a pristine environment is today really, in some cases, ridiculous. No? Then we have to understand that relations of the entire socio-ecological system, no? And then adapt to all the world programs, no? Obviously.
Of course. Thank you very much, Jordi. Iggy?
Thank you, Pamela. I have more to say about the management and state of conservation part rather than the inscription of World Heritage Sites, but Monica's question is more about the 10 criteria. Something to say about the 10 criteria could be that maybe it's missing some of these new concepts like the community value and meaning, how communities are engaging with the value. So something more about how communities have evolved, and the intangible heritage dimension needs to grow. Maybe even the intangible representative list and the World Heritage list might need to merge one day, you know. It might be an artificial divide, just like between culture and nature, there might be an artificial divide between intangible and tangible heritage. We see these in some sites. I agree with Cornelius's comments on authenticity. Authenticity is also changing, being reinterpreted, and it's sometimes interpreted in a way that does not acknowledge that life flows, and every action, every layer of history, every new development adds to the significance, and the authenticity has to be flexible. So measures to facilitate this relationship between heritage and the flow of life. Rubén had this wonderful slide about conservation and development are actually part of the same thing. And I think that should be worked on into the criteria. And also about beyond the inscription, the general World Heritage methodological framework has this asymmetry between the importance of inscription versus conservation. That's what our World Heritage as a movement derived out of this concern, you know, that and I see it in my own experience, national delegations, governments, it's like a football game. How many points can you get? How many sites can you get on the list? Once it's 1 and not 0, that's the victory. And all the nuances, all the subtleties about how communities get more sensitized, or there's a long-term process of better sustainability. These are not acknowledged in that 1 to 0 black and white system. And once you are in, you gain a one score, then all of these management and sustainability, resilience issues are suddenly, so much at the back of the priority list. So and I think one way to overcome that is to take the power balance or the voices more into the site managers, the local communities, and somehow put pressure on the national level decision makers to actually listen to the sustainability needs beyond that 1 to 0 black and white scorecard. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Iggy. I'm sorry, we have to close the session.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, we have to close the session. Thank you very much. I would like to thank our panelists for this fruitful discussion. I think we can conclude that the interactions and iterations of human activities with the intangible and built environment lead to social and territorial transformations in which culture is the agent of change. The footprints of social spatial exchanges on the natural, intangible, and built heritage intersect histories of architecture, technology, society. And I would like to close with that. Thank you to OWH New Heritage Approaches and Sustainability teams. Thanks to the International Cultural Center in Krakow for co-organizing this event and giving us the platform to discuss the future of our World Heritage. Thanks to all the attendees for joining this session. Please don't forget to check our website, www.ourworldheritage.org, to understand this initiative and to see the variety of activities that we are having since January until the end of the year. We are New Heritage Approaches and Sustainability Themes. We prepared a broad set of activities in June and July, and we are working very hard to raise awareness about our world heritage, to engage community and different stakeholders to make a change. And we are looking forward to having you involved. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Thank you very much for this very inspiring session. I really liked the notion culture heritage mainstreaming. I think we shall be using that more often. And now we are inviting you for a small break, and in 15 minutes parallel sessions will start. So see you in separate streams in 15 minutes. Bye.